last week to respond to some unfinished business from my presentation last week and make some final remarks. One of the things, for example, is I wanted to say more in support of marriage as an institution. I did a great deal during the presentation of the various chapters, trying to demythologize the challenges, the difficulties, the pains, the complications of marriage, and to get out of the cultural nonsense that it's a mystical experience that's wonderfully beneficial and flows greatly between two people who are really in love with each other. I wanted to go systematically through all the issues the couple has to surmount, look at, work with, struggle with, and can make pain and difficulty and trouble for them. It is a lot of very important work. I think of it as gardening in some way, planting of crops, taking care of them, watering them, fertilizing them, tilling the soil, getting enough sunshine for them, and all the rest of that. It is endless work. And anybody who wants to get married, if they want the marriage to be vital, needs to prepare for that endless work. Nevertheless, I was going to close with a kind of paean of praise for being married. The effort is wonderful. If it's done well, it can be very exciting. It can be very fulfilling. And it keeps you on your toes, and it frequently calls out your better angels if you have a partner to struggle with. It is one of the best learning experiences available for understanding the dynamics of human relatedness and for dealing with the turbulence that comes up between any two people. The only other thing that's as powerful is having children. But this is a different one because it is a struggle that goes on between two peers. It's not the subordination of self for the benefit of an organism that wouldn't live without all the devotion to the child and the need for self-subordination in order to make the child's life possible. So that was my intention for what I was going to do today. And then I would close. At any rate, my plans for doing that today were simply blown up one after another by the events of the week. These events plunged me into a late life. I am now in unusual and unvisited territories. I said before you joined, Aaron, that I did not get a single moment of sleep last night. I was brooding and tossing and turning and visiting things and thinking about myself and thinking about my marriage and thinking about my death and thinking about my clients and thinking about having to say goodbye to my clients, a whole variety of topics that were just cascading in me. And I will talk about what I did to adapt to what I was going through as we go on. But at this moment, I soon remembered something I thought about in classes as I experienced my own turbulence and my own tossing and turning and racing thoughts and visiting one thing after another. I remembered that I have likened the journey of life as a river journey. And there are periods of meandering when the journey is gentle and pleasant, and we're in meadows and pretty landscapes and nice beaches alongside the river, and we feel at peace and like floating down the river in an inner tube or swimming down the river in whatever way we're moving down the river. Periodically, however, there is the sound of the beginning drumming sounds of waterfalls and turbulence, and the pathway gets all riled up, and we head into rapids, and we get plunged over crises and down into whirlpools down below and swirled around, and it's suddenly very tumultuous. And that's what was happening to me. I had gone through the ending of an era and the frightening opening up of a new one. So I'll jump ahead a little. One of the things I did when I got up this morning, I remembered that Erik Erikson, who was, of course, somebody I revere for all his struggling with the meaning of lifespan developmental psychology and his various eras that had to be transcended. I remembered reading somewhere that he had left some notes behind in his estate, and his daughter had found them. And he was ruminating about what he called bringing the life cycle to a closure. He was going to add on thoughts about an era beyond his eighth stage of the human lifespan. And she succeeded in taking his notes and writing a book about it. So one thing I did when I got up this morning, I looked at the reviews of the book, and I'm purchasing a copy of the book for myself, hoping I might find some wisdom about the topic is the benefits of being very elderly. So that already is a challenging title. I'm looking forward to reading the book. Here are the 5 things that destabilized me. Before I went to bed last night, my wife and I took a walk together. We typically do that at the end of the workday. We walk. Sometimes we just walk in the neighborhood. Sometimes we drive somewhere where there are really beautiful, elegant, very pricey houses to look at. And we'll park there in the neighborhood and walk and see beautiful architecture. And we had been driving off to somewhere. There is a node of difference between my wife and I when it comes to driving. She frequently will feel most comfortable if I let her drive. It has meaning for her that she be in control of the vehicle, that she drive according to her rhythms and her style, and it gets frightening for her if I'm behind the wheel. However, she doesn't like driving my car. It's an old sports car, and it's not her cup of tea. It's not comfortable, and it's awkward and gawky for her. So every once in a while, I'll drive, particularly if it's just a neighborhood visit. And that was one of the evenings. I drove to where we were going to walk, and I did 2 things that upset her. One, I waited for people in a crosswalk, and I wasn't dead still. I was creeping forward a little bit towards them as they were crossing. And she started yelling, "Look out! You don't drive that way." And I felt scolded. And on another occasion, I had pulled up to turn, and I did not turn my turn indicator on until I had come to a dead stop. And she said, "No, you're supposed to turn your turn indicator on 100 feet before you make the turn, and you're not doing that right. Can't you drive right?" And I did not make any angry retort. I just listened to her. But it was on my mind. I don't like those kinds of interactions, so they puzzle me in some way. And remembering that, and that can be chronic between the 2 of us. So I want to get defensive like an asshole. I want to say I have not had a ticket or been an offender bender in 30 years now. I put together that record. I'm not a dangerous driver. I'm sorry you can't just sit there and be uncomfortable and keep it to yourself when I'm driving. I didn't say any of that. I would have a year or two ago, but I certainly didn't on this occasion. I said, "I'm sorry you're uncomfortable. I'll pay better attention." That's what I said to her. Yeah. So that leads me to the second topic. This was the week also. One of the reasons I managed her better was this was the week also that I had been introduced to the writings of somebody named Marshall Rosenberg. I am really sorry I didn't know him while he was still alive. As I get farther and farther into paying attention to him, I've discovered he has about 25 YouTube presentations stored out there, and they're all fascinating and very worthwhile. As far as I'm concerned, he is the guru of human relatedness. I'm so surprised that he has hardly any following. I never stumbled across him in all the workshops, things I've seen, literature in my field, books, everything. There's been no reference to him whatsoever. My wife is also a member of the California Association of Marriage and Family Therapists. He doesn't show up anywhere there. He's never been asked to present a lecture to that group or write anything for them. There's no continuing education credits for studying him. And I think he's the most powerful, most important, and most overlooked guru in our field, and well worth spending time with. He is the master at seeing the distresses that spring up in any human relatedness. He said the problem started about 5,000 years ago. Up until then, things flowed more graciously. But starting about 5,000 years ago, cultures became stronger and people became more willing to be a member of a culture and to have cultural leaders who would inspire them and tell them how to live. So we invented about 5,000 years ago the concepts of right and wrong, the concepts of evil and precious, the concept of progressive and retrograde, all kinds of concepts. And we no longer experience the isness of everything. Every time we have an experience of any kind or exchange any kinds of word with somebody, we're evaluating it with one or another of these templates. My wife was evaluating my driving habits with, I'm driving incorrectly. And Marshall teaches us that when these kinds of irritations spring out between people, it's because it's based on some interpretation of what is happening, not the thing itself. And second of all, the irritated and problematic way of expressing the difficulty with whatever is going on is really a disguised way not to talk about what a yearning is or what a need is. Behind every criticism, scolding, difficulty, misunderstanding, somebody has a yearning for something and they're too cowardly to come forward straightforwardly and talk about what the yearning is. The next thing that happened to me, I put the finishing touches yesterday afternoon before I went out for the walk on the technology I'm involved in now, and that is contacting all my clientele in my practice, telling them I'm prepared for the eventuality that I might die somewhere down the road or might get incapacitated, and setting up a system where they can let me know if they want me to stay in touch with them and pass them on to somebody else to take over if I get incapacitated. And that was very mournful to finish what I was going to write and to get ready to start to send it. I didn't like that. I don't like thinking about letting go of my practice. And the last thing that's surprising me is this book itself. It is very upsetting to me to be ending the book. It's been a sustaining project now for many weeks. It has taken care of something I thought I would never really take care of properly, and that is I would actually get a book written. I had 7 partly written books. I never finished one of them. They were chaotic because I couldn't tell who my audience was. Was I writing for graduate students? Was I writing for colleagues? Was I writing for the lay public? And I would go back and forth and in those 3 different voices and with different kinds of material. And it was just a mishmash. Every one of those books were full of good stuff of some kind, but they didn't integrate in any meaningful way. I don't think there would have been a market for any of them. This one felt different. I made a choice that I would write something for the lay public, and I would stay in that voice and evaluate the information based on whether the lay public could benefit from it and it might be useful to them. And I've come through to closure. I've already seen, because somebody is starting to turn my spoken words into a typescript, into a manuscript. So I've seen how I've talked and what I've done. And it's gawky, and it's going to need editing. Well, some things need to be thrown out, some things need to be rearranged. There need to be some additions put in. Some of the language has to change, but that's very different than having a first draft of a manuscript to work from. And I do believe I will finish a book, but it's like climbing a mountain you've tried to climb up all those years. There's always a depression when you get to the summit. The task is over. It's been completed. Now what the fuck? So these 5 things were all running in me last night and just making me miserable. What am I writing? Not one iota of sleep was available to me last night. Oh, all right. Here's what I visited in an attempt to get a grip on myself and find some peace. The first thing I thought of was the myth of Sisyphus. Sisyphus is supposedly tormented and condemned because he has a huge rock to keep rolling up the steep trail and to get it to the top of the peak. And every time he gets close, the rock gets away from him and comes bouncing and crashing down to the bottom of the hill again. And he has to groan, go back down the hill and start pushing uphill again. And that's seen as a terrible torture. Well, in my strange mood, I saw the myth of Sisyphus and I saw it as a beautiful story. What a fortunate man he was. He knew the purpose of his life. He could feel what it was like to pursue the purposes of his life. And even if it seemed like an impossible challenge, he knew how to do it. And he had grown strong muscles doing it. And every time the rock would get away, with this reasonable good humor, he would just start pushing it up the hill again, because that was his destiny and that was his challenge, to keep doing that. So I saw him as heroic and not as being tortured. And that somehow calmed me in some way to visit that. Oh, then my irritation with my wife. I took a page from Marshall Rosenberg and I decided I had to hear her and to be present without judgment. My judgment was, she's mad at me, she's trying to control me, she's meddling in my life, why doesn't she leave me alone? Those were all my judgments. But I listened to her again. I thought about what she said to me. Wait, and I wrote it down because this was very powerful. Where is it? I then got very sad when I heard her in a different way than I had been listening to her. I visited a memory, and the memory was what it meant to me and how I understood what being a good husband was. The memory is from the night I proposed to her, and it's been steadfast with me. I've been holding on to this ever since that night. I remember it vividly. When I proposed to her, I was driving home. She accepted, and I was feeling mellow and bittersweet, and tears came to my eyes. And she said, "You're crying about something." I said, "Yes." And she said, are you regretting that you proposed to me? Are you having second thoughts? Is that what the problem is? I said, well, what's wrong with you? And I said, I'm afraid I'm going to fail. And she said, you're going to fail? I said, yes. I want this to be very special. My first marriage was very painful and bad. I want this to be special. And here is the strange daydream I had. I daydreamed I had become very old. I think I was 39 when I had this image. I had become very old, like the death of Ivan Ilyich. I was on my deathbed and I knew I was going to die soon. And I was trying to evaluate whether or not I had been a good husband to you. And I had a yardstick. The yardstick I was using to measure whether I was going to be a good husband to you was, would I have the courage always to tell you everything? And I said, I don't know if I will. You need to know I can be sneaky, I can be withholding, I can be cowardly, I can try and gloss things over. I can not want to own what I've really done. If I start down those pathways again, I will fight myself and try and set it straight again. But I wish I had more optimism that I was going to succeed in that challenge. Well, here I am. I'm now 91 years old. That has been a steadfast belief of mine for all these years, more than 51 years of marriage. And the truth is, I've done a reasonable job of holding to that promise and that commitment. I don't always speak in the moment about something that's troubling me, but I will bring it up. I may have to wait a while or find a diplomatic way to do it or find a better moment to do it. But I don't have any secrets from my wife at this moment. I feel very proud of that. And I've always felt I have been an excellent husband. And after reading Marshall Rosenberg and going through what I went through last night, I feel like I have neglected two other things horribly, and I have been a terrible husband. I listened to her tale of my driving in an entirely different way. And I saw that my yardstick of not keeping any secrets was really very egocentric and self-serving. I wanted not to be any secrets because I would know that she could hear all the ugliness and all the stupidity and all the terribleness, and she was still sticking around and still caring about me. So that was really a complicated way of doing something selfish for myself and making myself safe. Maybe sometimes at her expense, having to listen to things that were probably unpleasant or frightening or obnoxious to her. The two things I did not do that I now believe as I get older and wiser are an essential part of what I need to do for her is I need to act in a way that will result in her feeling secure. This is some altruism I need to do for her. And the second thing is I need also to act in some way that at least a reasonable amount of time she feels like she's being cherished by me. And those lovely things that I'm capable of doing for her weren't even on my list of what's important in a marriage. And I was disgusted with myself in the middle of the night. I promptly got up in the morning, and before she even got out of bed, it was after 8 o'clock. I went to the market and I came home and I awakened her with a bouquet of flowers. And I told her how precious she was to me. And I tell her I have failed her horribly, and I'm the purpose of my life now will be to rectify that. I will try to keep her secure. I understand now that she's not scolding me because she thinks I'm an evil person or a bad person when she doesn't like my driving. I'm going to listen to all her prompts because that's the only way she can feel secure. Those things are not important to me, and I don't need them to feel secure, but she's not me. She is her and needs to feel secure in her way. And since I can do this, I will do this for her without rancor. I will not get irritated if I slip and I'm not driving in a way that allows her to feel secure. And I will bring her flowers more often, and I will find other ways to tell her I've noticed something precious about her and that I would like to cherish her for a few minutes. I have now made that commitment to her. And that's the additional one I have to keep carrying out until I die. It isn't only about my being honest with her all the time. Oh, right. The myth of Sisyphus, my irritation with my wife. What is next? Oh, from Marshall Rosenberg. What is behind the troubled difficulties we get into with fellow human beings and the troublesome messages we're exchanging with each other? As I said, this eventually arises from some deprivation of an unmet need. And we are cowardly, we disguise the need. Many of the needs we've been taught we shouldn't have. They're bad needs and we shouldn't feel that way. So we hide them and we're scolding the other for not meeting the need, but we're not talking about the need because we don't feel entitled to have the need. He has wonderful concepts. He even differentiates between needs and wishes. Needs are not wishes. Needs are absolutely essential. They're essential to our sense of well-being. If we don't meet the needs that are primitively built into us, we will suffer. We will become less effective. We will get into trouble with ourselves and with other people. And I have a long list of potential needs that my client who turned me on to him found published and sent them to me. There are three kinds of needs. They're in three drawers in three different categories. One are needs for subsistence and security, and it includes air, food, health, movement, physical safety, rest and sleep, shelter, touch. Touch is one of them. Water, It has subparts of freedom and security, or subparts of subsistence needs. And leisure and relaxation is absolutely essential too. There has to be enough of that. Those are one set of needs. The second set of needs are needs for connection with other human beings. And he has a long list of them: affection, appreciation, attention, closeness, companionship, harmony, intimacy, love, nurturing, sexual expression, support, tenderness, warmth. Goes on and on. To be heard, to be known, to be trusted, on and on. And finally, there is a need for meaning in life. Our activities have to be construed as being meaningful to us. And we get there by living with authenticity, by trying to become competent at something, by honoring creativity in ourselves, by always being dignified, by always being honest, practicing self-acceptance and self-care, self-correction, as I'm doing all through the night and not today, and mattering to oneself. That's an important part of meaning, to be able to matter to oneself. So I love his list, and I'll pass it on to other people. And there's a lot more. Onward. All right. Next thing I did tonight to try and steady myself is I visited Le Petit Prince. Let's see, do I have my copy here? There it is, The Little Prince. Written by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry in the 1930s. He was a wonderful character, Saint-Exupéry. He was both a writer and he was an early adopter of aviation. As soon as biplanes were out and available for the general public, he came from a very wealthy family, so he learned to fly a plane, and he started delivering the mails in various parts of the world. And in the 1930s, he decided he had a special plane built for himself, and he decided he was going to make a trip around the whole Earth, near the equator. So he was flying out of France and over North Africa, and he had engine trouble. And he had to crash land on the desert somewhere south of the Mediterranean in North Africa. And he sat there. He was not injured. He sat there in a wrecked plane, and he had no idea whether he would ever be found. He was out in a very remote, non-traveled section. There were no airports around, no roads around, nothing. Just the endless desert. And he hoped that aircraft would come and fly over and that they would see him, and eventually he'd be rescued. But he decided he would go mad if he didn't do something to try and fill up his time. So he decided he would write a book for his child. He would write a children's book for his 5-year-old. He did have some paper and writing implements in the cockpit. And so he started writing The Little Prince. Actually, he did a very poor job. This is not a book for children at all. I think it bores children. It's really a child's book for adults because it's full of important concepts that adults need to pay attention to. And there's a section here that felt very relevant to my night struggle. It has to do with a willingness to get over being schizoid and withdrawn and untrusting, and to take a chance on bonding with one or more people. Oh my goodness. Oh my. I'm sorry I'm wasting time. I have. I'll keep turning pages. Maybe I'll find it. Ah, I found it. Here we go. The little prince has been exploring various places on Earth and various customs we have and finding them very strange because he's arrived here from some other planet. He's trying to understand the ways of life here on this planet. So this is the section I want to read. It was then that the fox appeared. Good morning, said the fox. Good morning, the little prince responded politely, although when he turned around, he saw nothing. I am right here, the voice said, under the apple tree. Who are you? Asked the little prince, and added, You are very pretty to look at. I am a fox, the fox said. Come and play with me, proposed the little prince. I am so unhappy. I cannot play with you, the fox said. I am not tamed. Ah, please excuse me, said the little prince. But after some thought, he added, What does that mean? Tame. You do not live here, said the fox. What is it that you are looking for? I am looking for men, said the little prince. What does that mean, tame? Men, said the fox. They have guns and they hunt. It is very disturbing. They also raise chickens. These are their only interests. Are you looking for chickens? No, said the little prince. I'm looking for friends. What does that mean, tame? It is an act too often neglected, said the fox. It means to establish ties. To establish ties? Just that, said the fox. To me, you are still nothing more than a little boy who is just like 100,000 other little boys, and I have no need of you. And you, on your part, have no need of me. To you, I am nothing more than a fox like 100,000 other foxes. But if you tame me, then we shall need each other. To me, you will be unique in all the world. To you, I shall be unique in all the world. I am beginning to understand, said the little prince. There is a flower. I think that she has tamed me. It is possible, fox, sorts of things. Oh, but this is not on earth, said the little prince. The fox seemed perplexed and very curious. On another planet? Yes. Are there hunters on that planet? No. Ah, that is interesting. Are there chickens? No. Nothing is perfect, sighed the fox. But he came back to his idea. My life is very monotonous, he said. I hunt chickens, men hunt me. All the chickens are just alike, and all the men are just alike. And in consequence, I am a little bored. But if you tame me, it will be as if the sun came to shine on my life. I shall know the sound of a step that will be different from all the others. Other steps send me hurrying back to the underneath the ground. Yours will call to me like music out of my burrow. And then look, you see the grain fields down yonder? I do not eat bread. Wheat is of no use to me. The wheat fields have nothing to say to me, and that is sad. But you have hair that is the color of gold. Think how wonderful that will be when you have tamed me. The grain, which is also golden, will bring me back to the thought of you, and I shall love to listen to the wind in the wheat. The fox gazed at the little prince for a long time. Please tame me, he said. I want to very much, the little prince replied, but I have not much time. I have friends to discover and a great many things to understand. One only understands those things that one tames, said the fox. Men have no more time to understand anything. They buy things already made at the shops, but there is no shop anywhere where one can buy friendship. And so men have no friends anymore. If you want a friend, tame me. What must I do to tame you? Asked the little prince. You must be very patient, replied the fox. First, you will sit down at a little distance from me, like that, in the grass. I shall look at you out of the corner of my eye, and you will say nothing. Words are the source of misunderstandings, but you will sit a little closer to me every day. The next day, the little prince came back. It would have been better to come back at the same hour, said the fox. If, for example, you come at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, then at 3 o'clock I shall begin to be happy. I shall feel happier and happier as the hour advances. At 4 o'clock I shall already be worrying and jumping about. I shall show you how happy I am. But if you come at just any time, I shall never know at what hour my heart is to be ready to greet you. One must observe the proper rites. What is a rite? Asked the little prince. Those also are actions too often neglected, said the fox. They are what make one day different from other days, 1 hour from other hours. There is a rite, for example, among my hunters. Every Thursday they dance with the village girls. So Thursday is a wonderful day for me. I can take a walk as far as the vineyards. But if the hunters danced at just any time, every day would be like every other day, and I should never have any vacation at all. So the little prince tamed the fox. And when the hour of his departure drew near, ah, said the fox, I shall cry. It is your own fault, said the little prince. I never wished you any sort of harm, but you wanted me to tame you. Yes, that is so, said the fox. But now you are going to cry, said the little prince. Yes, that is so, said the fox. Then it has done you no good at all. It has done me good, said the fox, because of the color of the wheat fields. And then he added, go and look again at your roses. You will understand now that your particular rose is unique in all the world. Then come back and say goodbye to me, and I will make you a present of a secret. The little prince went away to look again at the roses. You're not at all like my rose, he said. As yet you are nothing. No one has tamed you, and you have tamed no one. You were like my fox when I first knew him. He was only a fox like 100,000 other foxes, but I have made him my friend, and now he is unique in all the world. And the roses were very much embarrassed. You are beautiful, but you are empty, he went on. One could not die for you. To be sure, an ordinary passerby would think that my rose looked just like you, the rose that belongs to me. But in herself alone, she is more important than all the hundreds of you other roses, because it is she that I have watered, because it is she that I have put under the glass globe, because it is she that I have sheltered behind a screen, because it is for her that I killed the caterpillars, except the 2 or 3 I saved to become butterflies, because it is she that I have listened to when she grumbled or boasted, or even sometimes when she said nothing, because she is my rose. And he went back to meet the fox. Goodbye, he said. Goodbye, said the fox. And now here is my secret, a very simple secret. It is only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye. What is essential is invisible to the eye, the little prince repeated, so that he would be sure to remember. It is the time you have wasted for your rose that makes your rose so important. It is the time I have wasted for my rose, said the little prince, so he'd be sure to remember. Men have forgotten this truth, said the fox, but you must not forget it. You become responsible forever for what you have tamed. You are responsible for your rose. I am responsible for my rose, the little prince repeated, so that he would be sure to remember. Oh my. Ah. Another thing I remembered as I was struggling with my night and with I was learning from my new mentor was the importance of experiencing in the here and now the rawness of an experience and not trying to analyze it or to make sense out of it or to dissect it. And he said he has a PhD in the mental health professions, and he's been taught to analyze everything, to try and ask himself, how did this start? What does it really signify? What's going on in the unconscious? And he said, those ways of thinking are entirely destructive. It keeps us from simply being present in the moment and experiencing what the other person is attempting to share with us. And he quotes Sartre, much to his liking. The way to destroy an experience is to analyze it. And he talks about if you do that, you climb up in the ivory tower of your consciousness and become an observer of the life around you rather than one who's flowing and participating in the life around you. I think there's more I still need to talk about with regard to this topic, but I have run out of the notes I took after my awakening this morning, and I think I'm going to end early and go on with this in a subsequent meeting when we get together for 2 weeks from now, I gather it will be. Yeah. So boy, did I unload a bunch on you guys. Thank you for being there to absorb it.
Anytime. Well, on the sadness of ending something, the great composers, those compositions never end. They always keep going in your head. That it's very Sisyphean, any kind of great task like writing a book. I don't think you ever finish. You just have to stop at some point.
Yeah.
I have two comments. One, when you were talking about kind of like the end of practice, the end of the book, the end of life, and that you're, I don't know, I always think that I'm sort of defined by what you do. And, kind of like in some ways you go on as long as you can in terms of kind of like doing something that's meaningful, which is for us, I think, is practice. So in some ways it's in that concept or in that dimension, it's perpetual. You keep doing it, and in some ways it gives you lifeblood. It gives you the blood of life. It gives you
as long as I'm able to engage with it.
Yeah, and in some ways it makes you alive, it defines you as being alive. And so if you, that's why in some ways I can't imagine you or even myself kind of like the idea of kind of like retirement or what is that, kind of like what am I going to do, play golf every day or something?
Yeah, that once you've done stuff like this, it does make it difficult to imagine.
So it's you do something that's meaningful every day, and each time you receive a referral, you have a new story, you have a new chapter, you continue on. So in some ways, if you end your practice, then it's like, well, you don't end your practice keeps going. The other part,
you didn't hear me. I know I'm going to die. I don't think my practice will keep going when I'm dead.
Well, but you'll keep going as long as your heart keeps beating.
Yeah, that's definitely been demonstrated.
Yeah. And so in some ways that your practice will continue as long as you possibly can. And so that's kind of like who you are and what provides meaning for you in your life. The other part in terms of like your observation with Hermine and the concept of providing security and cherishing her. I thought about that in terms of like you I don't know, it's like at times when I'm walking with my wife, I move her to avoid the cars.
Yeah,
And so I'm
that's very
providing
true.
some
That's
security
very
with her.
caretaking.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But then she sometimes complains to me, it's like, well, gee, if I'm, watching a program, a sports program, and she said, well, gee, you're not really cherishing me. And I think that providing security and cherishing your partner is not always something you're doing all the time.
No, but it
But
needs to be done sufficiently. It's like watering a plant. You don't have to pour tons of water on it every hour of every
yes,
day.
yes,
You at least have to give it some water occasionally.
yeah, it has to be constant. It has to be regular. So in some ways that if you're not always, if you miss a beat, or you miss a chance to provide security, that doesn't mean in some ways you're a bad husband.
No, I've just slipped for the moment, and nobody's perfect. I can catch myself and make some amends for it.
Yes, yeah, yeah. So don't be
Well, I
so hard
remember,
on yourself.
oh, well, I'm always in a contest, and I have to be harder on myself than anybody is ever hard on me. I have to win that contest somehow. It's a stupid contest. Uh, God, I was starting in another direction. Oh, it was about how I abused her, how I did not cherish her or keep her safe. For 40 years, I abandoned her over and over again. I thought I was meeting the test of being a good husband by being straightforward and always telling her what was in my mind and in my thoughts and in my heart. But I was abandoning her over and over again and putting my connection with the American Psychological Association in first place. That was where my allegiance was. That's what I had to do. That was the significant contribution I was making to the human race to try and advance my profession and watch it grow and prosper and help define what the profession is. And that was sacred work. And I expected her to fall in line and just be happy that her husband was doing that. And that was entirely egocentric. That was not her project. Why should I expect that she would be thrilled that that should be my first leading project?
But then, in some ways, the work with the American Psychological Association was something that was very meaningful to you.
Yeah,
So in some ways that you obviously has to be kind of like a reasonable balance between you
there
doing
wasn't a
something.
reasonable balance. If there was a position to be filled, a space where I would rush and volunteer to do it immediately.
Hmm.
Then I would have to figure out, what does that mean? When am I going to be gone next? And what events in the life of the family am I going to miss? And it took priority. And that was, I am really ashamed of myself now in retrospect. For 40 years, I did that to her. Hmm. But that's another nice thing. It's never too old to change, to get wiser. Well, let's see, I started talking about this in group yesterday. The dangling thread here I haven't taken up is the effect of working or attempting to work with that man who was found out by his wife to be having an affair, and the marriage seems to be blowing up. That struggle somehow captured my attention very powerfully this week. Oh, yeah, that's kind of asshole-ish on my part. The challenge is really a noble one because the odds of my succeeding are not very great. So I can't lose. Either that will go nowhere in particular and they'll get miserable and continue divorcing each other, or I'll make a miracle happen and I'll revivify and put new life in that marriage and get them to fall in love with each other. And wouldn't that be something? I like that. I can't lose. Anything else at the moment? Okay, have a wonderful 2 weeks, and I will be back in 2 weeks. Maybe,
right.
maybe in 2 weeks I will finish that up and move on to something else.
Okay.
Oh, I probably will have read what Erickson has to say by that point too.
Oh.
I'm
I'd
very
like-
curious
I'd like-
about what he thinks the final resolution of the life cycle is.
Mhm. Beyond ego, integrity versus despair.
Yeah, there's something beyond
Yeah.
ego integrity versus
Yeah,
despair.
you
Yeah.
will enlighten us.
Yes, I
Yeah.
will. Be glad to. Bye.
All right,
Okay.
bye.
All right, bye now.